anything that you truly believe, you've got to ask yourself, what's it based on? Where does my belief come from? Who's giving me this information? Who's told me this? Where have I picked it up from? We need to question everything that's in our heads. If you've ever enjoyed a comic, not nowadays, because with all this woke culture, nobody dares tell a joke, but we've had a whole lot of really good comics out there. And if you look at a comic, what they do is they use their imagination to share with us a different perspective. And it's that, like you're led down this path and you're seeing the world from this place, and then suddenly the comic turns it upside down and shows you the world from a different perspective. And that moment it throws your mind out, and now you laugh because the comic has used his or her imagination to show you the world from a different perspective. And you are going in this linear railway line, and suddenly, whoop, and then you start laughing.
Yeah.
Because it really is funny at that moment in time. And so the comic is showing us what we could all be like, applying our imagination in our daily connection with people, the way we speak. Just allow our imagination. Children use their imagination all the time in play. My children taught me to play. Better late than never. But my children taught me to play. And it's that imagination. But if you have a child sitting by a window and they're sort of in a reverie, they're dreaming, like, stop dreaming, come and do this.
Yeah.
We should be encouraging all of us to dream, to go into reverie. Was it in Australia, the Aborigines?
Yeah.
They go on their dream walks or whatever. They have a dream time.
They've got the dream time. They've also got the highways, the whispering lines.
I don't know much about it. I just remember that, that's always stuck in my head, the dream time.
Yeah.
It's that recognition, it's that we do have these abilities. There was one time it was winter time in Malvern, which is on a hill, and we were just coming down this hill, and kids in the back, girlfriend by the side, and I just went into a reverie. I don't know why, but it just happened. And the reverie was of a year previously when I slid on the ice.
Mm-hmm.
And I woke out of that, and I was just turning down, and suddenly I began sliding all over the place. My subconscious was telling me what was going to happen. It was informing me by using images from the past of what was going to happen. I think I've mentioned this other one of I was leading a meditation class, and we were at someone's house. She had cancer. She wasn't very well. And I was preparing myself to lead the meditation group when, unbidden, suddenly I see this light just come up above her head. It was sort of bluey, purpley light, and it just hung there. And I didn't give it a thought, okay. But later on I learned by reading some sort of Buddhist text that they recognize that when someone is about to die, there is a sort of separation of the soul, and they see it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, this woman died 3 days later. So our imagination can give us information about our surroundings, the world. We need to cultivate it. And what stops us cultivating it is our ego, our fear, our indoctrinations, our rigidity of thought. Now,
What do you think about environmental aspect to that, though? You know, I've heard people talk about calcification of the pineal gland, and there are protocols that you can do to reduce that, so that you can open your third eye.
okay, I don't know the truth of that. I have heard that before, and I don't know the truth of that. I've also heard, when I was doing my Taoist training, they were talking about calcification of the gland here. What's this one called? The
Thymus.
thymus. So, you know, we used to sort of whack it just to sort of free the heart area. I'm sure, you know, they are glands, and all glands release hormones. However, the human body is a complex structure which is interactive. Every part of the human body is interactive. Nothing, just like we ourselves do not exist in isolation from the universe around us, so there is no part of our body which exists in isolation from any other part. Yeah? And what I mean by this is that when we suppress emotions and we create structural disharmony and imbalance, that distortion goes through the tissues and it affects different organs depending on the emotions and the location, and different glands. So as a result of emotional suppression, we will create distortion, and that distortion will go through various hormonal glands. And those hormonal glands, when they stop working properly, they have a knock-on effect, because all the hormonal glands, they're like a pearl necklace. And so each one affects each other one, because nothing exists by itself. So emotional suppression distorts the body, which affects the workings of the hormonal glands, and that includes the pineal and the thymus. So yes, and it is possible, I will ask Charlie in a second, but it is possible that some sort of rigidity, possibly calcification, I don't know, but certainly, for sure, certainly rigidity will occur because of the structure. However, to free that requires releasing the emotions, because in releasing the emotions, we release the body.
This was the little wrong way that I took. I got obsessed with opening my third eye, but I was forgetting about the heart. And it was really about sorting out the problems with the heart. Then this followed.
It's very common. It's very common. What people do not appreciate, especially a lot of so-called spiritual people, and I'm going to say so-called because the whole concept of spiritual is dodgy to me, is that the ego will impose. So you've got an impulse that arises out of your subconscious. It's basically sharing information with us. And as it comes up, that information is, there's a problem here or there that needs to be sorted in some way. You need to reflect, you need to experience the emotion, whatever it is. But there's an action that is required. So the impulse arises from us. And as it arises, it's like a bubble from the depth of the sea. Am I boring you?
No. It's a little bit tired from your coffee.
Sorry. I can talk too much. I acknowledge, I admit it, it's my failing. This bubble arises from the depths of the sea. And as it comes towards the surface, you see what I'm doing is I'm using imagination to describe things. That's what we want to do. So as this bubble rises towards the surface, the words in our heads, our lower mind, interpose themselves, and they do it very subtly. They begin to narrate, use words to describe an aspect of that sensation that was surfacing through that bubble. But it happens so fast that before we know it, it's now the words which are talking in our heads. And we identify with the words and we see ourselves, we are the words. And that impulse has now been suppressed. So we want spiritual development. So now we read all these things and they tell you about this, that, or the other and exercise it. And we interject and we go into that. And we're really, because we're unhappy in ourselves. We know something's not right. So we're now chasing information. And as we begin to work with that information, we're not aware that the ego, through the words, through the mind, has inserted itself and now takes over. And we do all these exercises, but we don't actually do the work.
Mm-hmm.
We think we are.
Spiritual bypassing.
Yes, we think we're doing it because we're moving this, we're doing that. You're doing the breathing, whatever it is. But what happens there is that we now, and this is one aspect of arrogance comes into that because now we are the ones who know it all. I meet people like that all the time in Facebook. They know it all. And, there's not much one can say. Because they know it all. What can you say? It's like this. It's this idea of the glass that's full of water, and they say, "I'm thirsty," and you say, "Okay, I'll give you some more water," and you pour the water, but the glass is full. Nothing's going in because they're so full of their own knowledge that there's no room for anything new. Yeah, and that's everywhere. That's what we do. That's how the ego interjects, takes over. And then we think we're becoming spiritually enlightened because we've got access to so many exercises, to so much information. We can sit. When I was in my mid-20s, I would sit for half an hour, longer, meditation. The teacher would come, he would go, everybody would have left. I'm there. I'm so with it. But in hindsight, I look back and I see that I was totally locked in ego.
Yeah.
There was nothing else. There was no emotions. There were no feelings. There was simply a rigid mind keeping me there. Yeah. So the ego will always get in the way. You can't fight it. Can't get away from it. I had a little interaction with someone not long ago on the internet. They were talking about semen retention. Asceticism. Well, I've done that in my life. I did about 8 years in my 20s to early 30s. I did another 8 years or so or more, maybe, coming up to my 40s when I was doing my Taoist training. And it totally screwed me up. So you begin with good intentions. I wanted to lose my ego. And I was going to do it by giving up sex. God almighty, I used to wake up early in the morning with a stiffy and I'd go, no! Then you wonder why all these priests like young boys, It totally does your head in, it screws you up. Suppression. So there is nothing wrong with ego. Ego is important. It helps us to navigate the world. It has a place. Our egos are damaged. We can't help that. We came into this world knowing that this was what we were going to have to work with. And the answer is not to get rid of your ego. The answer is to acknowledge the ego, accept the ego, but lift ourselves beyond the ego so that we don't operate from a place of fear, but rather from a place of love, acceptance, appreciation. And I'm talking about ourselves, not other people. Love of self, appreciation of self, because we cannot focus on the world if we cannot sort out what's going on inside us. It has to begin with us. Yeah. So we need to love ourselves. We need to accept ourselves. But the ego never goes away. And those people who try, and I was one of those people who try to get rid of the ego, it's the ego trying to get rid of the ego. How it's not possible.
The trying is
Yes.
always the ego.
Yeah, you cannot move beyond it. You cannot fight fire with fire. So anyway, so that is one of the problems we have with so-called spirituality, that the ego cannot be gotten rid of. We have to accept where we are.
Yeah.
We need to move beyond. So anyway, anything you want to say on that before I move on to the next bit?
That's all good. Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah. Can't think of anything.
Okay. I can think of a lot of things. So, I spent most of my life in isolation. Now they can't get me to shut up. So, why all of this is so important? By now, hopefully, you've seen the video of the children and you will have appreciated that there is a wonder beyond our conception which has been denied to us, which is part of our heritage. I mentioned in many other podcasts and articles about what I call the true human aliens, which 500 million years ago, they imparted 1.5% DNA onto what we were then. And these abilities of the third eye, these abilities that these children express, they're all part of that. They're part of that 1.5% that we inherited, which has been suppressed. It hasn't always been suppressed, but it has been suppressed. And if you give yourselves permission to contemplate the potential of what it is to be one of those children as an adult who have this vision, and then you add to that, because those children are not doing that yet, but you add to that the ability to connect with events beyond the norm, with psychic phenomena, like I've been sharing, astrology, my visions,
telepathy.
Who?
Telepathy,
absolutely. All of that.
EPS.
EPS, yeah. Well, if you add all of that and a lot more, because we don't have the imagination to connect with what I am describing. And what I'm describing is the true human aliens who are so, like we've been here 500 million years. We're talking about a culture that has existed in this galaxy for 55 billion years. They've had their ups and downs, but they're there. And we are, the reason why there's so many of us in the world at the moment is because there is a momentous event happening in about 23 years. And, touch me. And a large proportion of the population then, 23 years from now, which will be about 2/3, which is it's going to be roughly around 4 billion people, will need to depart from this planet. Because if they stay here and they die here, they will be stuck in this planet this will be a cataclysm. And there will be very few people left. And the ones who are left, they're going to be of a very low level of congruency within their connection. They'll be lost in fear. They'll be lost in their egos. And they're the ones who are going to be having children. And so those few survivors, they will be the next cycle. And that means that those 4 billion people who have been incarnating over the past, God knows how many millions of years, at different moments, they've built up enough experience that they can and they're ready to move on. But to move on, they need to be born into the world as it is and move beyond their egos, i.e., they have to deal with a lot of their emotional and blinkered perceptions, which they have picked up. And we all knew this before we were born, that this is the world we were coming to. And this is our opportunity, your opportunity, not mine, I'm not going anywhere, but your opportunity to move beyond. But the only way this is going to happen is by doing the work, which is happening, and it will happen, of connecting with our hearts, freeing ourselves from a lot of the political, cultural, religious, spiritual indoctrination, which is and has been going on in this world for a long, long time. We have to be able to clear our eyesight. We have to see the world anew. And we have to create enough movement from the ego, not a lot. The average human being exists at a place of around 19% integration with their soul fragment. That is, they're lost in fear totally. And what I'm talking about is moving up to about 45% of integration. So that at this level, two things. One is they will be connected with their hearts a lot more. Not all the time, but enough. And secondly, their imagination will be active enough so that when the true alien humans come here 22 years from now to pick up this 4 billion, who will be ready for this, they will hear the call, because the call isn't going to be by words, it's going to be by telepathy. So if your imagination is not open, if you're not open to your subconscious, you will not hear the call. You will not hear when they're telling you, go to this location to be picked up on this day at this time, because that's what's going to happen. So this is why I do this podcast, these conversations, to provide information, which some people will see this and they'll think I'm mad, corny, whatever. That's okay. I am doing this for those who can hear, which will increasingly be more and more as the future, as the years roll up. So this is why it's important to open our imaginations. This is why it's important to connect with our hearts. And
I thought one of the most touching aspects of that video was, the conversation I had with the mother, and how she was talking about how her son's changed for the better, how he's having much more deeper thinking, but his confidence and his just general, approach to life is just more integrated, more fits into his body, and he's really kind of like achieving his potential, but in a very relaxed and calm.
And he's what, about 8 or 10 years old?
Yeah. Both those children seem very mature, didn't they?
I understand from people, the blindfold reading is only one part of what Nicola's teaching. So tell me how else it's helped Harry in his life.
It really seemed to help his confidence and his ability of how he viewed life. And as we'd be driving back from the lessons, the questions that he'd be asking were just so grown up and in depth, and like the meaning of life. It was just amazing how he just started to see a bigger picture of everything. We all have our gut instinct and our intuition, and I suppose this has helped Harry trust in his gut and his intuition. So you can expand and just play games with it. So if we're in the car, he has to guess what the car is that's going to come around the corner next and the colour it's going to be. and say if the phone rings, who's on the phone and what are they wearing.
So are you saying that he could actually tell you who is on the phone and what they're wearing, and then do you ever check it, and is he right?
As I was saying, the more he practices, the better he gets. When he first did it, he was really brilliant at it. And then as he's got a little bit lazier in his practicing, it fell. And then he's really got enthusiastic again recently, and he's been practicing. He's reading every night with the blindfold on, and that just helps bring everything else sharper. So he then becomes better at those guessing games.
So I'm glad we talked, because I thought that this was all, you blindfold someone, it's right in front of their face, and they can kind of see through the blindfold. But you're saying that
you can expand it. Practice. Yeah, that's like where you start. That's the starting point. And what you do with it, or what the child does with it, is kind of up to them, I suppose.
Well, that's how it should be.
Yeah.
They're free thinkers. It would be lovely if more and more children were brought up, educated this way. But it's not going to happen. It'll happen for a few, but it's not going to happen. And there's a lot of people who are now in their 30s. They'll be about 50 by then, even in their 40s, they'll be in their 60s. They'll be in their 50s, they'll still be in their 70s. There are still a whole lot of people who are ready for this transition, which has got to happen. Because if it doesn't happen, which is what I was saying, they're going back to square one, because you've got a few people who are totally damaged. They're at the mercy of the critters. And so they're having children, they're just regurgitating the same stuff. And it's going to take a long time before soul fragments who come up can actually separate themselves enough so that they can, when they die, they can automatically move on to another planet for their next reincarnation. As long as we have emotional damage that we haven't addressed, as long as we're incapable of connecting with our hearts when we die, we're stuck here. Now, these 4 billion souls, they know this. This is why you lot are here. This is why you are hearing me, and why you're doing what you're doing. You're searching, you're questing, and this is what it's about. You just need to do the work. Have we exhausted this thing? Or?
Yeah, I think there is a reward for it, though. For dropping that identity, for spending that time, for observing your thoughts, for saying, "Oh no, this is what, all right, this is who I am," and I just wish more people could get that hook, because what's going on is, again, there's more of this outsourcing, isn't it? The people are very popular with the plant medicine and the DMT. They want to use a drug to get them there, yet we have this free ability that is an amazing drug that does you no harm, it does you loads of good, and it's sitting there waiting for us, and yet so few of us are compelled to explore it. Why are we so afraid of it?
Drugs are great. What I mean by this is psychotropic drugs can be great for specific situations in specific context. My wife, years ago, someone really, really close with her died, and she was really, really depressed. She's got issues with grief. She was really, really depressed, and she was going downhill. And I said, right, let's go to Amsterdam. So we went to Amsterdam, and we bought some magic mushrooms. Not the mushroom itself, it was something that was legal over there. It's the nodes underneath, which still contain the ingredient. And we had an amazing time. We were ringing everyone saying, I love you. And we laughed and we laughed, and we came back, and her brain had been reset. Her ego, which had got stuck in a groove, was reset. She could now move beyond the ego in a way that she got stuck in because of her childhood issues to do with grief. So there are times when a psychotropic can be really useful. People who are dying and they're really stuck and they cannot see beyond the wood for the trees, they can actually see that in fact there's so much more to us. And so once they realize this, and they're no longer bothered by death. So there is value in it. You cannot rely on taking LSD just to fix your suppressed emotions. If you've got a lot of suppressed emotions, you take LSD, you're going to have a bad trip. So you have to be, I took LSD, and I took LSD and magic mushrooms at the same time. I was around 30ish. It was a hippie encampment, and people offered it to me. I'll have a go. And we were sitting. It was in the evening, and we were sitting by the fire. I'd gone with a friend. She was a female, and I went into a very morose state and introverted. And I said, "Oh, can I just put my head on your thigh?" I said, lie there. And we were sitting around the fire. Yeah, go on, you sit there. So I was just lying there with my head against her thigh in this deep, morose, emotional state. I didn't understand what was going on. And time moved on, and then I said, "Oh, I must go to bed now." So I went to my tent, and I laid down, and ding, ding, a little dot of red, blue, green light. It's like a TV set. And then it became like squares, and then it became like a tube. And this went on for quite a while, and I was starting to feel like it was so mental, like it's so...
You wanted to get off the train?
Yes, I wanted to get off that train, yes. Yeah. And then it changed. My world went dark, and it became scary. And devils from my childhood, because I was raised a Catholic, devils from my childhood began to rear. And I could experience my anxiety increasing. And then suddenly, out of the blue, literally out of the blue, because the firmament began to go blue. And so there was this sort of black darkness at the bottom, and then this blue coming up on top, almost like sunrise. And there's a little cloud. And then a propeller aeroplane just began to fly by through the top. And it had a banner behind it. And the banner, as it was waving in the wind, it had 4 letters in red. It said, love. And as soon as I saw that, the whole nightmare disappeared.
Yeah.
My subconscious had said, right, enough of this, and showed me the way home. And I came out of that, oh, God, I need to go for a wee. It was 3 a.m., opened the door, and there's a dog standing in front, literally in front of my tent. And, well, hello. It reminded me of Carlo Castaneda's books, like the spirit thing, like he was protecting me. Probably my fantasy, but nevertheless, it's very friendly, and he came with me as I went for a wee. So I sort of, 3 a.m., it was quite dark, a lot of stars. And so I just woke up, and I walked to the top of this mound, and I just put out my willy, and this rainbow comes out of me. So So again, that was my imagination superimposing on the outside world. So that was my one experience with LSD. I wouldn't recommend it, as it were. I think a lot of people have good trips, or a lot of people have a lot of nasty trips. You really got to get your emotions together to do things like that.
Yeah.
I was very lucky. My subconscious saved me. They have their point, but at the end of the day, like you say, you got to work on your emotions. It's the only way out.
Yeah.
And also your belief systems. Anything that you truly believe, you got to ask yourself, what's it based on? Where does my belief come from? Who's giving me this information? Who's told me this? Where have I picked it up from? We need to question everything that's in our heads. Everything.
Every thought that passes, really.
Yeah,
it's an audit. It's a period of time, isn't it? It seems overwhelming, but I think it becomes automatic. Something was coming up in me this morning when I was cycling over, and it's like, what is this anxiety? Where do I feel it? And I'm sitting with it. I'm cycling, and I'm processing as I'm feeling that release. That's the responsibility I have to myself, because otherwise these thoughts are just going to get me carried away and go somewhere else, and I'm back in fear.
And give yourself time. You were doing it very well because you were doing it whilst you were cycling. I used to work as a carpenter in my early days, and I used to listen to afternoon plays, and many a time I'd be sawing some wood as I was listening to the play, and they would say something, and suddenly I'd be in tears, and I'd be experiencing this emotion which had been awakened in me just by listening to the play. I'd be there sawing away. Wonderful, I used to love it. To really enjoy releasing the emotions within us. It's wonderful. We don't do it enough. We need to really cultivate that. And sometimes to do that, we need to be by ourselves, unfortunately. And the reason why I mention that is, like with your cycling, is because I'm doing physical work, because you're cycling, it frees that other part of you. You could be running, you could be jogging, it doesn't matter what it is, but in doing this other physical activity, it frees this part of ourselves to reverie.
Yeah.
And if we allow this, it can be very healing. I think we've done enough. Yes?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, like I said, I wrote an article. It's got exercises you can do. They're not exhaustive, but it's just a starting point. I will leave a link below. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy our talks, please hit the subscribe and give us a like, thumbs up on the like. Many thanks. Bye for now. Thank you.